you all for allowing me to take part today. One of the advantages of not having prepared a paper is that you can change what you're going to say as you're going along. So I'm not quite sure if we'll live up to what Paul has just said. But I want to talk, and it's been interesting this morning, there's been a sort of mixture, a meeting of the theoretical and the practical, which I think is really interesting from Oakley, let's say, through to the last panel. And what I said will follow on very clearly actually from what Corinne's just said. In fact, she's stolen some of my thunder, so I'll just talk about something else instead. But I will tell you a little bit about what we do at UCL, which is about putting these ideas of global citizenship into practice. It's not perfect, it's developing, but it may, I hope, give you some sources of inspiration, and we can open a dialogue between these different institutions. So my name's Tim, I'm Senior Lecturer in European Thought and Culture, I do philosophy, I do literature, I work on silence, all sort of stuff, not to do with global citizenship. But I'm also Academic Director of Global Citizenship at UCL. And what we do there is we've decided to put a program together, right, that actually will be the vehicle by which these ambitions, the sort of students we want to educate, a vehicle by which that will be realised. So we have a set of criteria which define the global citizen. If I read it to you, you'd realise it was much along the lines of the sort of things that Oakley was talking about. But it's reasonably all-encompassing, as I'll say in a moment. We want to have our cake and eat it. We want to be critical on the one hand, but we also realise that students come to university, they want to be globally employable. So we sort of play both ends of the spectrum. So in one sense, what we're doing, I guess, is not shutting down the options. I can't remember who was talking about that, I think it was in the last panel, but we're allowing students to work out for themselves what the different possibilities, these contradictory possibilities are of global citizenship. And I think that's being quite valuable. So as I say, we have a program that we run 2 weeks after exams finish, before the summer holidays begin. We started 4 years ago with about 100 students on 2 different courses. This year we had about 900 students on 10 different courses, so it's grown enormously. It's centrally funded. And what does it consist of? Well, we have 10 strands, 10 courses. And I just want to give you a tiny bit of detail on some of them. One set of them, 6 of them, are a bit more academic. They focus on UCL's grand challenges, that's to say, that's more management speak, but it's the research priorities that the university has. Things like global health, human well-being, sustainable cities, intercultural interaction, transformative technology, and equality and justice. So we take those as headline things and we put courses that relate to those. And I'll just talk about 3 of them very quickly. We have one under the Sustainable Cities strand that gets 100 students together, and it looks at Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And the students are divided up into about 6 or 7 groups that adopt the identity of a particular social actor. So here's the whole point about empathy and imagination. For 2 weeks, they are maybe the government of Tanzania, or they are slum dwellers, people who live in informal settlement, or they are international NGOs, or they are Tanzanian business interests. And we have this scenario-based activity, here's the imagination, where a theoretical or an imaginary urban development, a new port complex is proposed that will move people out and will benefit various other people and so on. And the actor groups have to get together and negotiate the outcomes. Okay? Students working together, negotiating outcomes. At the point of crisis is quite interesting. This isn't where cooperation is necessarily something that is easy, that is without conflict. We get students to think about, through an imaginative and empathic process, how they can negotiate even at the point of crisis. Similarly, another strand on global health looks 50 years into the future and has scenario-based activities that students divided into different countries this time, Mexico, Indonesia, Bosnia, goodness knows what, they have to work together to respond to various hypothetical global disasters that will have a global health impact. So, I don't know, antibiotic resistance, what will we do here? And how will these countries work together? India in this scenario, I think, has got the drug that is resistant. Hang on. To which the things aren't resistant, and how will the countries work together to solve that? Or tsunami that wipes out, I don't know, one part of the world. How will the countries work together to deal with the public health implications? Okay? And the third one of the more academic one, I won't give you all of them. The third one is about the Danube. It's the one actually I set up because I do things about Central and Eastern Europe and sometimes. And we get the students once again to learn the languages of 8 different countries down the Danube, from German through to Hungarian, Slovak, Serbo-Croat, Yiddish, Ukrainian, and so on. But they look at the way in which this region that is tied together by one river is almost like a metaphor, or actually it's probably more like metonymy for the world as a whole. That these societies that are linked by a shared environment, this river, once again come into conflict, but also have to cooperate. But I wanted to mention that because of the language element, right? That it's not, we make them learn, students for 2 weeks, we make them learn, Slovak or Bulgarian or Romanian or whatever it is. So we have those more academic things. And then we have, and also in the Danube one, we bring it home. We look at Danubian migrants in London. And what they do is they make documentary films, ethnographic portraits of Danubian migrants in London. We have this image of Danube on Thames. We overlay, right, the Danubian region onto London. So that's the more academic ones. And then we have a second set of courses that are more practical, more about how students go out into the world. One on social enterprise, I won't talk about. One on the voluntary sector, I won't talk about. But the two I do want to say something quickly about. One is employability, right? And here we're on the sort of global capitalist end of things. This is about students, preparing for a global job market. Yes, thinking about their responsibilities, but ultimately is actually about a global job market to a certain extent. And it's very successful. But on the other end, we have a new course that we introduced this last year, which is called Active Citizenship. And there we get the students to learn about how you put on a social and political program, to work with campaigning organizations and so on. And the programs that they put together are quite interesting. Some of them are quite sort of straightforward and uncontroversial, perhaps for us liberals, things like, working about sweatshops or how we welcome migrants in London and so on. But one of the campaigns that the students put on was in association with Divest Invest, right, which is about fossil fuels, specifically aimed at UCL, and it's still controversial investment in fossil fuels. So what are we doing here? I think we're trying to do some of the things that we've all been talking about, but maybe Oakley was talking about as well, to think, to get the students to do, I think is important. To learn by doing, to explore what global citizenship is by working together. It helps, of course, that we are hugely international, right? I mean, Ustinov College, those statistics are even further than us, but we have about 45% international students. I just looked it up this morning. As a result, actually, I was saying yesterday at dinner, talking about international students in UCL doesn't make any sense, right? Because everybody is international by living in London, incidentally, and our strapline is reasonably accurate. We are London's global university, so almost the global citizenship happens through getting the students together, and I'm sure that's your experience here in Ustinov. But yeah, we have a framework of what we think global citizenship might be about, but we get students to explore it themselves and to make up their own minds and have those debates. We do it through developing imagination, through encouraging those sort of empathic gestures, and so on. And so far it's working. How do we make this more than an add-on is quite interesting. So at the moment this is something separate, it's not assessed. Very important though, because students are able to experiment, right, which you can't do in assessed courses in quite the same way. Now I've been asked to look at developing a program that might be largely online, but also have a face-to-face element that all 4,000 undergraduate students would do in their first year. Sorry, we have 35,000 students in total, but the first year, each year of undergraduates is about 4,000. That would be a real challenge, right? It will require major commitment, but hopefully that will go some way towards the idea that came up with, I can't remember what came up with Lakin, right? How do you not just add on, but transform the university fundamentally? And that's much more difficult. Now, how long have I got? Halfway, right? Yeah. Just quickly on the reflections on what's happened since last Friday. Essentially, I'm sort of, so I don't have to say too much because it will repeat a bit what Corinne said. Like her, I want to tell a story. Right? If a few weeks ago, we don't have beautiful buildings like here in Durham, but if we do have this lovely quad with a neoclassical building, and if a few weeks ago you walked into the main quad of UCL, you might have looked up to the top of this neoclassical portico and the dome, and you would have seen the flag. And on the flagpole was a flag. And for a few weeks, it was a rather unusual flag. It was an art project by the Slade students, right? The Slade School of Fine Art. And it was made out of silver blankets that had been sewn together, the silver blankets that are put round the shoulders of people from Syria who are arriving on the shores of Greek islands. And it was called, the art project was called the New European Flag. And when it was put up, the Ode to Joy was sung, right? And this was it, okay? And that was there. Now, a couple of weeks later, after the results came through on Friday, I walked into UCL and I expected to see the New European Flag at half-mast. It was like the institution was in a state of mourning. And this disjuncture between this radical cosmopolitanism of UCL and our students and the sort of liberal society that we represent, and the way in which the country as a whole had responded was shocking. Well, maybe not shocking, but I think it brought home the truth that we in our totally liberal bubble, right, had not wished to face. It was, as it were, the encounter with Jack, right? And it's an encounter that I think we have to take much more seriously. You know, it's, as it were, cosmopolitanism is fine when everybody's doing well, but when the chips are down, when life is difficult, right, there can be a tendency, is that idea able to sustain itself? We're in a society that, as everyone has said, has been radically divided. Some have turned away from transnational form of citizenship, namely the European Union, that is perhaps a step towards the global citizenship that we're talking about. That we can see in the discourse of migration and in post-referendum racism, they wish to turn away from a globalized world towards a more ethnically homogenous, idealized past, perhaps we could say. I think this is extremely problematic. What lessons are there for us in educating for global citizenship? Well, I think, I was going to say there are three, but I'm only going to give you two. I'm not going to talk about the Stoics. They were reason number one, but never mind. Two points come from that. One, I think we have to realise that maybe our difficulties with empathy, well, traditionally when we talk about global citizenship, we say global citizenship comes from national or traditional citizenship. And the problem is, how do we extend to people who are far away from us the same sort of commitment that we have to those near to us? That's a traditional problem around global citizenship, right? How can we feel for someone on the other side of the world the same sense of responsibility and commitment that we feel for the people around us? Now, looking at my students and looking at myself, this is despite Oakley's very important point that actually occasionally we suddenly realise it's the people close to us, like on the Paris attacks, that we actually probably care more about deaths in France than we care about them in Iraq. You know, that shocking unease that we get from that realisation. But nevertheless, I think many of our students have greater ease in empathising with the Syrian refugee than they do with Jack, or Blue Man, or the person in Hartlepool who's unemployed and doesn't have any hope of getting a job, or the woman in, you know, Stoke-on-Trent who's on 0 hours contract in Sports Direct. That, in a way, is further from us, right, than the apparently this wonderful, exotic, global, multicoloured, whatever it might be. And, you know, without abandoning one for the other, that would have been the point about the Stoics, actually, is to see that these circles of proximity and distance are actually part of the same thing. But without abandoning our concern for the world, we have to realise that, in fact, the global is, or the far away might be much nearer than we think, right? And it's very hard, as I say, from our liberal bubble, right, to know quite how we do that. I think it's a challenge. Which brings me to the second point, which I think global citizenship, right, the word global, actually has two meanings, okay? Once again, let's go back to the Greeks. Citizenship, for the Greeks, where we got this concept from the Greeks, was exclusive, okay? You were a citizen of Athens, and you weren't a citizen of Sparta or Corinth or whatever. It was horizontally exclusive. You would fight for your city against these other cities that were in geographical space around you. And when we talk about global citizenship, we think of the globe, and we tend to take that meaning of global citizenship, right? That we don't want to be exclusive horizontally, we want to bring in all the societies of the world into our sphere of concern. But actually, ancient Greek citizenship was exclusive in another way, vertically, not just horizontally. It was male citizens who enjoyed the rights and responsibilities of privilege, and women, foreigners and slaves, right, didn't have those rights. And I think for global citizenship to be truly what it ought to be, it has to be global in both directions. We're quite happy with it being global horizontally, but perhaps we have greater difficulties with the vertical globality that in fact citizenship ought to take into account. So anyway, that's what I want to say. Thank you.